How's it going, guys? Thanks for tuning to this episode of the Phil Talk Sports Podcast. I'm going to be riding solo for this episode. Usually I would have Nick join me whenever I don't have an interview. He kind of always steps up as the co-host for this show. He is currently in Phoenix, Arizona at something called Hoop Hall West, which is a high school basketball tournament that he's going to be calling some games at. So next time I do have him on, he can tell us about that experience. Apparently, LeBron James's son is going to be there amongst with other highly recruited high school players for basketball. So that'll be a cool experience for him. Shout out to him. And next time he's on, we'll be sure to ask him some questions about that. But I'm going to do my best Colin Cowherd impression today. I'm just going to rock with the show by myself. Haven't done one like this in a while. And I'm just going to see how it goes. And I do want to get to the point that if I need to do a show by myself, I can. It's much easier when there's someone else there. I think it's more entertaining too for the people listening when, there's some back and forth, but I'm going to just do what I can to make this show as entertaining as possible. And if you guys have any hints or things that can help in the future, be sure to let me know and I can try and orchestrate those in. So it is December 10th as I record this. It's 2:00 on a Friday, and it is pretty close to the most wonderful time of the year. And I'm not just talking about Christmas. I'm talking about the college bowl season, which kind of coincides with that coaching carousel that always tends to happen throughout the year. I'm going to talk some UCF stuff in the beginning and just catch up on everything that's going on there. And then I'm going to move into the college bowl season. I'm going to start with the last game that I went to for UCF was the War on I-4 against South Florida. Very close win, 17-13. The Knights prevail. And what was somewhat a confusing ending to the game, there was a game-ending sack that the quarterback for South Florida still threw the ball that ended up getting intercepted. So in a way, he lost the game twice. But there was just a confusing part at the end of the game was, is there time left on the clock? It's like, well, no, he got sacked. So the clock's going to run out unless they run to the line and spike it. And I think it was 4th down or 3rd down anyway. So I don't think they would have had the ability to do that. So a big win against the rival, taking the all-time lead in the series. The Knights now have 7 wins against USF, and USF only has 6. Keep in mind, they started the series 4-0 against UCF, and it has been a 7-2 run since we've been in the same conference together. So that's a great way to look at it. I think that's when I feel the War on I-4 truly started, when we were in the same conference, because before that we just weren't even on the same level. So we are at a 7-2 run. Might be the last time for a while that we have that game in Orlando, as next year will be in Tampa, and then the year after that we might be in the Big 12. So who knows? It might be a little bit harder to schedule this rivalry game. I'm not one of those people that wanted to go away entirely, but I wouldn't mind if, maybe we don't get it every year. It might be that much more special. But if we get to the point where we can have it every year, similar to Florida State and Florida, like they're not in the same conference, but they make it work every year. So it would be totally fine if we're able to pull that off. As shortly after that, we, as UCF fans, were celebrating the win and everything. And then we find out that our star quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, who's been out for most of the year, he only played in 3 games this year. So technically it counts as a red shirt due to injury. Will be transferring. Don't know where yet. And I do want to clear up a little bit of, normally when someone transfers from UCF, they get the, best of luck wherever you end up from a lot of UCF fans and players and everything else. Dylan's got a little bit more pushback than the average player. For example, another quarterback we had, Quadri Jones, who's been here 3-4 years. He's going to transfer into what I believe is a HBCU to actually start, his last year in college. And people have given him a great send-off because he's been a fan favorite just because he hasn't played a whole lot. But the difference with Dylan isn't really that he's transferring. It's the way he's gone about it. And I want to make this pretty clear. He's not been the best teammate while injured, I guess, is the stories that have been coming out from guys like Brendan Hellwig and guys that cover UCF even closer than I do. And one thing, and I retweeted this, and it got a lot of, I don't have that many Twitter followers. I got a couple hundred, 300, I think. I think I just cracked 300. So if you follow me, thank you. If you don't, at Phil Talk Sports on Twitter. But there was this video that came out where before the War on I-4 game, where the team captains were coming out of the tunnel to do the coin toss. And we had, our normal Brandon Johnson and, other team captains. And Dylan is just about to walk out the tunnel, and he's just then putting his jersey on. And for some reason, that really struck a chord with me. Like, I remember sending that to Luke, and he just like, what does this mean? And to me, I'm like, one, it means he did not prep the game with the guys. And, most of these guys are in uniform an hour before the game, and he's just, last minute throwing a jersey on. Really showed that, like, half-heartedness of the whole thing. And for him to, transfer immediately, like the day after, basically, is when that news came out. I remember I was at a Stetson basketball game. I was getting ready for that game to start. and I checked my phone, and, this is, all over Twitter and everything. So it's not so much, I want it to be clear. People aren't like, oh, you're leaving us, so we hate you now. But it's more so the way apparently he's not been the best teammate while injured. It's not helped quarterback Mikey Keene in a way that he could. And what hurts Dillon Gabriel with this is we've seen this before, but happened in a much better way. We all know about how when McKenzie Milton was injured, how he basically became an assistant offensive coordinator for Dillon Gabriel. And a lot of other people will remember that when McKenzie Milton transferred to Florida State, it was basically because Dillon's here now, and they both are from Hawaii, both from the same high school. They've had a long time relationship as well. He basically said, this is his team now, and I don't want to get in the way of, that happening. So in a weird way, Dillon Gabriel is the reason McKenzie Milton did not finish his career at UCF. But on top of that, though, he will be playing his last college game at the Bounce House as he has accepted an invite to the Hula Bowl, which is, similar to the Senior Bowl for, draft evaluation, all that thing. So that's going to be cool. I'm hoping to make it to that. I don't know if I can or not. I got to check my schedule. But the thing with Dillon Gabriel, it seemed pretty obvious where he was going to go. He entered the transfer portal, and we were about 99% sure that he was going to go to Ole Miss. The reason for that is Jeff Lebby, the offensive coordinator that was at UCF when Dillon was recruited and when he had his first, 2 years here, is the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss. And that seems like an obvious fit until the reason it's a 99% chance and not 100 is now it seems like, and I think it's all but official, Jeff Lebby is going to Oklahoma, take the same position as offensive coordinator. Does that mean he's going to go to Oklahoma? Possibly, but they do have a quarterback in place, I think, at the moment. And it is hard to remember all these coaching carousel moves, which I am going to talk about here in a minute. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Dillon's kind of floating out in the portal. I do think in a perfect world, he was just going to go to Ole Miss. I know he was recruited by USC before he came to UCF. And, weirdly enough, I could just see him as like a West Coast guy, especially, I don't know if he's better than the guys they have now or if they're going to perceive him as such. But I could see him ending up on the West Coast if he doesn't end up at Oklahoma. Maybe he still likes the idea of Ole Miss. Who knows? Might end up there. So to summarize this, I think with Dillon, it was more, we weren't mad. We were just disappointed. We were disappointed in the way he seemed to have acted. And I'm not on the sideline, but I've watched games and looked at the sideline, and he did not seem very involved in the war on I-4. I would have looked at that more if this game wasn't so close. I will admit that the war on I-4 was a lot closer than it should have been at the time. But for him to just kind of up and leave, and people might remember when Gus Malzahn got hired, he kind of went dark on social media and basically had to have a meeting with Gus. I don't know that he convinced him to stay necessarily, but after they had a meeting, Dillon felt a lot better about where the program was going and ended up staying. So, he kind of threw a little fit like this when Gus first got hired. So, it's not a complete, the more confusing thing is his family members have come out and said that it's to find an offense that, better suits Dillon. Before Dillon got hurt, he played in 3 games. He threw 9 touchdowns, 3 picks, I think, at the time. Ran in 1 or 2. So, you're averaging 3 to 4 touchdowns a game. I don't think the offense is the problem from what I could see. I was at many of these games. I watched the ones I wasn't out of those 3. And nothing about that makes me think that like Dillon was clashing with the offense that was playing. Obviously, the offenses look much different with Mikey Keene at the helm as a true freshman who's just now turning 19 years old than a guy who's already had 2 years in college football. So I don't know how much I believe that. I think they just threw that out. It's what a lot of people say, and they tend to, be fine with, oh, yeah, he wants a system that better suits his style. Well, this suit, you're wearing this suit pretty good. You're having 4 touchdowns a game in the 3 games you played. So obviously it could have gotten better, could have gotten worse. So who knows? 3 games is a small sample size, but I just don't know that I fully believe that that is the reason for him leaving. For whatever the reason might be, the other thing that people are pretty upset about is with NIL going on, Dillon was selling his merch up until basically the moment he left, which some people didn't really appreciate. I'm not one who bought any of that stuff. Not saying I wouldn't have. I did have my eye on his like basketball jersey at one point, but then I just bought a real UCF basketball jersey. So if you bought some of that stuff, no harm, no foul. There was no reason at the time for you to think that, you'd be regretting it later. So no harm, no foul there. Wherever he ends up will be interesting. And, I don't know if his character is called into question at this point. That might be a little harsh to say, but he will not have as many fans wherever he ends up, where most guys do, like Darryl Mack Jr., who went to Old Dominion, and Mackenzie Milton, of course, still beloved by all of UCF Nation. So you just never really know, but it is going to be interesting. I just want to throw my 2 cents out there. I think I can sum her up the way I already have. We weren't mad. We were just disappointed. We were disappointed in the way it went down and just the lack of teammate that he was in the past 10 weeks or so since he got injured. In the other, I'm kind of doing this in order, so that's why I went back as far as I did. A day or two after that now, UCF Nation was hit with some pretty hard news that former running back Otis Anderson Jr., we always used to call him Juice, was killed. He was shot by his own father in a family dispute involving a dog bite, from what I'm hearing. He basically saved his mother with the way he responded and reacted. It did result in the loss of his life. If you're watching this on YouTube and not just listening on the podcast apps, I did put a picture of Otis in the beginning of the episode. Just a great guy. I think anybody that was watching at the time, if Otis wasn't your favorite player, he was in the top 5. And even back then, I would say with him, he basically created a new position at UCF. He was, I think Josh Heupel gave him the name utility player, just so he would be considered starting in the offense, even though he wasn't starting a running back or starting a wide receiver. He was also kick returner, punt returner. Just an amazing guy to watch. He'll always be remembered for, many different plays, the screen pass in the Peach Bowl, the screen pass in the USF game in 2017, the 2018 American Championship game where he, got it right over the top and did the peace sign as he got in the end zone. I'm convinced that he kind of invented that. I know since Tyreek Hill has started to do it, and in the Super Bowl, who's at Winfield Jr., I think, shot it back to him, the peace sign. But as far as I'm concerned, Otis Anderson kind of started the peace sign thing, and he definitely made it cool if he wasn't the first one to do it. And UCF has added a for the bowl game, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, a peace sign sticker for Otis that'll be on the helmets for the bowl game, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. But just rest in peace to Otis, just at the depth of it all, just being a great person, a great player, someone that people looked up to, younger fans. I don't think I've seen more pictures with one particular player on Twitter throughout the years than Otis Anderson. He was just always around and was great to the fans, and he was a joy to watch. So he's going to be missed by Night Nation. He's going to be missed by University High School Nation in Jacksonville and by all his friends and family. And I do want to throw out there too, he was a practice squad member of the Rams at this time, or shortly, he was a part of it early in the season. And the Rams, I felt, went out of their way to really show love to Otis too. I'm not saying this doesn't happen all the time, but I don't know that I've ever seen a team make such a big announcement about a player that's not even on your roster, but was on the roster in training camp and then was on the practice squad for the first, half of the season or whatever. So shout out to them for also showing respect to Otis, and just, thoughts and prayers to everyone in his family that's been affected. His mom, luckily, is okay throughout the whole thing. So, the only thing that would have made this worse is, 2 deaths. So luckily his mom is okay. And they had a night walk for him this past Saturday, which was great at the stadium and everything, which was awesome to see. I did not make it to that, but a lot of stuff was still set up. I went to the next day for a UCF basketball game against Bethune-Cookman, and some of the stuff was still set up. So you kind of got to, be a part of it still a little bit, which I'm glad they left it out for the other day. So just rest in peace to Juice. And I guess God needed a kick returner on his team because he's got one now. Take a quick break because it's really hard to transition from that to the next thing. So it's going to take a quick minute here and we'll be right back. So transitions are hard, right? Like they're, sometimes not the easiest thing to do. So I figured it was easy to just take a breath and get back into this. We're going to wrap up the UCF portion of the show with, as I mentioned earlier, it's the best part of the year. It's bowl season. And I've got to, maybe it's just me being, partial to UCF, but what I got to think is the most intriguing bowl matchup of the season, maybe outside of the playoffs or the New Year's Six games. But we're finally getting the Knights and the Gators in the Gasparilla Bowl, or as we're calling the Gusparilla Bowl here in Tampa Bay at the home of the Buccaneers and the rented home of the South Florida Bulls. We're finally getting the Gators and the Knights in a very interesting matchup. We have the Gators, of course, that are in a coaching change here where they're getting, Billy Napier after Dan Mullen's been fired. So I don't really know how they're reacting to all of this. I also saw their quarterback might not play. Their top receiver went in the transfer portal. And of course, UCF has dealt with injuries all year long. Obviously, no Dylan Gabriel. Don't know if Bowser's going to play our running back or anything like that. So it's great that we're getting this, but it's clearly not the way everybody expected, right? It's going to be the game is sold out from what I woke up this morning here on Friday, and the game is sold out. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be it's not the way we want it. We do have a 3-game series coming up with the Gators, and those games are going to be more the teams at full strength. But it doesn't mean that some UCF wouldn't want to win this like anything else. And we've seen it before with Georgia and then Auburn and other schools, right? You beat them in a bowl game and they say, well, how motivated were for the bowl? Well, I mean, if you can't get motivated for this, I'm sorry. That would be a character flaw issue for me. The same way, the Gators, was it the Oklahoma Peach Bowl this past year where almost everybody sat out and Kyle Trask looked terrible, but it got him on the Buccaneers because he kind of dropped in draft stock a little bit and he ended up on the Buccaneers. So, good for him, I guess. But to me, I don't know, like I understand if you're like a certified number 1 pick, right? And you don't want to play in the Dollar General Bowl. And that's always the bowl I poke fun at. Used to work at Dollar General, fun fact. But if you're a stud first round pick, no doubt about it, D tackle, D end, safety, wide receiver, whatever, tight end, whatever it might be. And you don't want to go to Mobile, Alabama and play in that, like that I understand. But in a big rivalry game like this, right? Or what could be a rivalry game, or if you get a New Year's Six game and you sit out of that, to me, that's a red flag. That's the way I look at that. If you are, not like all those Gators that sat out the Peach Bowl against Oklahoma, to me, that's a little bit of a character issue. How dedicated are you to this whole thing? This is an interesting spot because the bowl itself is kind of middle of the pack. I would admit, it's not the best. I've always considered, like the Liberty Bowl and the Citrus Bowl and a couple others to be like the higher end Alamo Bowl. I'm just scrolling through them now. Gator Bowl, stuff like that. To be the bigger non New Year's Six games, right? And this is kind of maybe one tier below that. But at the end of the day, I don't know that the bowl itself matters if the opponent does. Whereas sometimes if you're in the bigger bowl games, it doesn't matter who you're playing because you want to be involved in it. I'm excited for this. We're getting it not in the way we expected, and we got a little earlier than we expected because the first game in that 3-game series is, I think, 2024, I want to say. So we're getting it a little earlier, and neither team's at full strength, but that doesn't mean we want to win it any worse than if we were at full strength. So it's still gonna be an interesting matchup. I will not be there. The tickets sold out way too quickly, and I didn't know who I would get to go with me or anything, but I will be watching and definitely hoping we come away with the W. Go Knights, charge on. Some of the other bowl games, I guess we'll start at the very top. Also, congratulations finally to Cincinnati for being the first G5 team to make it into a playoff. It only took being the only undefeated team in college football this year and a bunch of other losses and a huge win on the road at Notre Dame. And I want to make this really clear when I say it. Cincinnati 100% deserves to be in this playoff. 100,000%. The issue that we are still having is they easily, if Oklahoma State scores in that Big 12 title game, what a game that was to lose it on that last play. You got Titans, Rams, Super Bowl vibes from that, right? Where he just has to touch the pylon, doesn't touch the pylon, and loses the game. Shout out to Baylor for winning the Big 12. We'll see you boys in a few years. But if that happens, I don't think they get it. And, to be the only undefeated team, I'm going to throw some parallels to UCF because it's a little too hard not to, right? But I'm not trying to make this about them, right? This is about Cincinnati for this year. And the other thing that about Cincinnati that's interesting is like this is their one shot because all their guys that are making this team this good, they're all seniors. It's not like they're going to leave early. They convinced their quarterback to come back a year. He could have easily been a top pick in the draft, right? So for him to come back for this year, and it's a weak quarterback class. So if he has a big showing in this playoff, that can only benefit him. So he's not someone that's already going to have an eye to the future when this still easily impacts his draft position and all that sort of thing. So I am happy they got in. I don't think it's a coincidence that they're lined up with Alabama right away. Just like last year, I don't think it was a coincidence that of all the New Year's Six games, you give them Georgia in Atlanta, basically an away game and a home game for the Bulldogs, and a game they easily should have won. They were hanging out, with a 10-point lead for 65, 70% of that game, lost it at the end on a field goal. Still think they easily could have won that game. They played well enough to win and just didn't. So maybe they've learned from that. It's largely the same team as that game last year. So maybe they've learned from that. And I'm interested to see how they do. I'm interested to see how Georgia and Michigan shake out. Georgia kind of fumbling the bag there at the SEC championship game. And it kind of erased, and it's not fair, but this is how it is. It kind of erased what a great year they had to just get, by the second half, manhandled by Alabama. It doesn't matter. They were undefeated. They had the best defense in the country and all that. All that's kind of gone away, right? All we can remember is, well, their best team. I forgot who put this out there on my Twitter, but it's sad, but it's true. The quote unquote worst team that Bama's had in 10 years just smoked the best team Georgia's had in 40 years. And that's just the cold hard truth of it right now. So if they are able to get by Michigan, who's had a great year themselves, shout out to Harbaugh, saving his job, winning the Big Ten. That was cool to see. I'm not a Michigan fan by any stretch of the imagination. I'd probably lean more towards Michigan State when it comes to that rivalry if I had to pick a team to cheer for. But, they are one of those teams, and some people don't agree with these statements, like with the Knicks and the NBA and certain other schools. There are certain entities in certain sports leagues that the league itself is better when those schools are good, or those programs or franchises are good. And they don't necessarily have to be, dog walking everybody, but if they're good enough to like be in the mix at the end of the year, I think Michigan's one of those. I think Michigan State, Penn State, it just makes more sense when they are. LSU's another one. They've had kind of a down year, right? When they're about it, when Florida's up a little bit more, it's just better. And it doesn't have come down to being a fan of those schools or anything, but seeing Michigan in the top spot, it is a nice change of pace. I'm curious if Georgia rebounds. They're kind of the wild card in all this because they are Cincinnati's the super underdog. Georgia and Bama have been in these plenty of times, and then Michigan is kind of in unfamiliar territory. So I'm interested to see how that goes. I don't know that Cincinnati beats Alabama. I'm not going to throw that out there or anything. But to me, it's not a mistake. It's not coincidence that they get Bama and not a rematch against Georgia or Michigan, where they, would maybe have a better chance. But at the end of the day, once you're in the playoff, the matchup, I'm not going to feel bad you got a bad matchup. It's the playoff. Like, you got to play Bama eventually, unless they get tripped up by one of these other teams. So, good luck to Cincy. Congratulations. They deserved it 100,000%. Like I said, if anyone's still mad, it's that it took all this extra stuff to go down for them to happen. And we'll see if, Bama with their one loss, trip up. If they would have lost to Georgia, I'm convinced they shouldn't have got in the playoff. And who knows, they might still got in if it was a close game or whatever. But we don't get to have that conversation because they won, and there's no reason to really bring that up because they played well enough. They won the SEC. A one-loss SEC champion is always going to get in. So had they lost, I think it's a whole nother situation. And for people wanting to expand the playoffs, me and Nick have talked about this plenty on the show. I'm all for it. I don't think it needs to be 12. I'd be happy with 6 or 8. I think that's a better way to go about it. But if you don't want to expand it at all, which eventually, this whole thing could lose juice and we don't actually get an expanded playoff, even though they've talked about it plenty. The easiest thing to do is just make conference championships a requirement to get in. That way, your conference championship games are essentially another round of the playoffs. You win or you go home. In this case, you go to a different bowl game. But it's that simple. It makes the conference championships mean more. Some people might not remember this. Some Gator fans might not remember this. And, I've lived in Florida my whole life. So not being a Gator fan doesn't mean I wasn't around all their success and everything. But Steve Spurrier basically left the Florida program because the fan base was getting too jaded. Like, winning the SEC wasn't enough. Winning the national championship, that's the real goal. There was a year where they were like in contention and nobody wanted to talk about that. They only cared about the national championship. And I do think obviously the national championship matters, right? It's the most important thing in college football, but it's not like the NFL. It's not like the NBA. You don't have one champion and 129 other schools just suck, right? That's not how college football is built up. So there's other things worth winning. Like, in college football, there's like 4 things that matter, right? You beat your rival, you try to win your conference, you win your bowl game, or you win the national championship. Those are like your 4 goals. So if you're hitting 2 to 3 of those goals every year, every few years, you're still a good program. So it shouldn't matter that you're not just winning the national championship. Obviously, it'd be great if it's not Bama every other year or every year. So you want more people in the mix. But college football is different. It's probably one of the reasons I like college football. Love the NFL, but I love the different vibe of college football, that it's not just one champion and everybody else is terrible. It's not how it works. Okay, so I also wanted to run through a few other bowl games that I'm excited for personally. People might know this about me outside of UCF. I do cheer for Penn State, and they are in Tampa as well at the Outback Bowl on New Year's Day against an Arkansas team, that's had a great year this year for the Razorbacks. And that's going to be an interesting one. We just found out that Penn State's quarterback is returning for next year, so he will be playing in this bowl game. The Fiesta Bowl, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State. Notre Dame obviously dealing with their new coach, Marcus Freeman, who's, has a lot to prove being 35 and the coach at Notre Dame. Some people think he's not ready, but if a bunch of Catholics think a 35-year-old can't lead a group of men, I got some facts to tell you about Jesus that you might be interested to find out. But that one's going to be interesting. I think if they're able to win that game, that just straps the rocket to them, to use a wrestling term, and it just makes Notre Dame feel that much better about moving on to Marcus Freeman from Brian Kelly. What else we have here? Iowa, Kentucky in the Citrus Bowl. Kentucky's kind of made its home in the Citrus Bowl the last few years. I know they beat Penn State in there a couple years ago. We have Ole Miss and Baylor. That should be fun. I don't know how great of an actual game it's going to be, but that should be a nice, shootout, I would imagine. What else we got? Michigan State and Pitt in the Peach Bowl could be interesting. Duke's Mayo Bowl with North Carolina, South Carolina. I feel like these teams don't play as often as they should, given, they're the north and south of a state. So that one could be interesting. There's a few others here, but I think that's most of the good ones. Houston and Auburn could be interesting. And I'm just going to real quick throw this out there too. I always felt the Hawaii Bowl and the Bahamas Bowl, which are often considered kind of lower tier bowl games, right? I think those should be held in higher regard. I think it should be a reward that your team gets to go out to the Bahamas or Hawaii, or those fans get to go out to those places. UCS played in the Hawaii Bowl a time or two. Wouldn't mind going back there in a year, at certain points, just because I think that would be a great job. Obviously, it's more expensive to get fans out there, but the stadium they play in is also smaller. So you're not trying to get 60,000 fans like the Gasparilla Bowl has, for example. But yeah, those are just some of my thoughts. Let me know what bowl games you're most looking forward to in the comments, or tweet me at Phil Talk Sports on Twitter. Also want to throw out there for this week, there isn't no college football this week. We do have the Army Navy game this week, and that is something I always look forward to. I don't have family in either. One of my best friends, my best man at my wedding, shout out to Jeremy, is in the Navy, so I've always kind of cheered for Navy in this game, but it's just fun. It's a different atmosphere. It's a bowl game within itself, really. So if you never really watched the game, if you've kind of hummed it, no, they don't throw the ball, it's a great time. Definitely check out the Army Navy game this week. There's nothing quite like it. I just want to throw that out there real quick. Now it is time to put the quarter in the carousel and go up and down and around for the coaching carousel of this year. And oh boy, I'm glad I wrote these down because there was so many of them. We have Dan Mullen gotten fired at Florida for Billy Napier from Louisiana Lafayette. I was a big fan of what he's done at that program. The Raging Cajuns, one of the best names in college football, by the way. I just got to say, like, if you can think of a better Division I name for a school than the Raging Cajuns, I would love to hear it because I think they're the number one. He's done a lot. It reminded me, UCF kind of got built on. There's so much talent in Florida that even if you're getting the third time around recruits, right, the 2 to 3 star guys, you can still get a good team together and win games. And I feel like Napier kind of did similar things in Louisiana for, Lafayette here. And I think it's a great fit. Dan Mullen, for whatever reason, just didn't look at recruiting as important. I think if he would have found someone that could handle most of that for him and he could just coach his game, he might have been fine. He's had success in the past. We can't pretend like he hasn't. But things just got worse and worse when you lose control of the narrative of, being someone that's not into recruiting and doesn't care about anything but the X's and O's. It's kind of an issue there. We talked about it already that Notre Dame's new coach, Marcus Freeman, is because of Brian Kelly moving to LSU. Some people consider that maybe a lateral move. Some people might even consider it a step down. But I don't think a lot of people realize how much of a pain in the ass it really is to try to win in Notre Dame. You don't have a conference, right? You're manually building your schedule every year. That's frustrating. You have such academic, strictness. There's probably a better word for that. But, the academic levels that you have to get to be eligible at Notre Dame are way worse than even, say, Alabama or LSU. Not saying those schools don't value their academics, but it's a night and day difference, right? So I don't know how he's going to do at LSU. He doesn't seem like a great fit. But then again, Coach O was the greatest fit you could have as a coach to a school. And he won a championship, and then he was out 2 years later. So fit is a little bit overrated. I think if you're good and you win, that's the fit that everybody wants anyway. So I wouldn't, I don't think he's a great fit. Will be interesting to see how it happens. I do think he's got to turn stuff around pretty quick because, again, they just got rid of, Mr. LSU, the guy that would have fit that program more than anything. So if he's not really blending with the culture and not winning games, could be short. It's a risky move because at Notre Dame, he's actually the winningest coach Notre Dame's ever had. More than Holtz, more than, guys back in the day whose names I was trying to think of, like Rudy flashbacks, but all the guys from that, he's the winningest coach in Notre Dame. So for him to leave that for this new job is a little bit commendable in a weird way, but overall rough choice. I'm definitely Notre Dame's not usually a team I would cheer for success, but Marcus Freeman, if he can pull it off, I think a big red flag when Brian Kelly left and I think maybe one assistant coach went with him to LSU. That right there tells you, maybe he didn't have the best relationship with those coaches, and Marcus Freeman does. And if they can start off with the win in the bowl game and go from there, sky's the limit. This last one confused me a little bit. I don't know if it's confused you guys, but Miami Hurricanes basically hired Mario Cristobal, which I was making sure I got that name right. It's a very difficult one to say. They basically hired Mario before really firing Manny Diaz, excuse me. Manny Diaz basically didn't get the notice until they knew for sure that Mario was on board. And basically what that says to me is they were only going to fire Manny if they could get Mario. They weren't going to fire him and then go looking for a bunch of people, because this is a really interesting run around the carousel when UF, LSU, Notre Dame, and Miami, USC, let's not forget, had a coaching opening for a while, which of course that's another one that we need to talk about. So it's not a great year to try and be, even if you're a great program, right? It's not a great year to have to find a new coach. So I think Miami was only gonna get rid of Manny if they knew for a fact Mario Cristobal was coming, and they did not want to, have to deal with that otherwise. And some people are pretty happy about it. He's done a pretty decent job at Oregon in the meantime. That's another job now that's opened up, obviously. And then out at USC, of course. Actually, one more thing on Miami. I do feel bad for Manny Diaz because I do think he was slowly trending in the right direction. But let's not forget that before he took the Miami job, he was signed, sealed, and delivered to go to Temple, right? He's going to be the head coach at Temple University, and kind of just went out the back door and, went over to Miami. So sometimes you reap what you sow. I thought he was slowly going to make things go in the right direction. Apparently they think Mario is going to do it faster. And there's always this thing with Miami. They always try to look within in some direction. Like they're, Manny Diaz, he didn't play at Miami, but he was from Miami. The coach before that was Mark Richt. He was a former Hurricanes quarterback. And now, again, they have a guy that's from Miami, a Miami guy, because that apparently matters to them a lot. Sometimes you got to look past that. But, I think if this Miami guy doesn't work, you kind of have to shut that down and look forward somewhere else. The other big one, of course, was USC convincing Lincoln Riley to leave Oklahoma, where he's been the man of that place. And just some of the terms are ridiculous. I guess he owned 2 houses in Oklahoma. They bought both of them for $500K over asking price. They gave him like a $6 million house in LA. And a lot of people have kind of came back and said that maybe he didn't want to deal with the SEC. He enjoyed just dominating the Big 12 the way he has for the past several years. So that's going to be interesting too, because USC, everybody knows what they used to be, but they're not that anymore. And I'm not saying they could never get back there again, but usually guys on the West Coast, they don't want the long-term project. They want the quick fix. And I'm sure they think that Lincoln Riley is the quick fix. And if someone had to be a quick fix, it's probably him. But I'm interested to see how that goes with him moving forward. So I don't remember a year where this many high-profile coaches at high-profile programs just up and leave. And, Notre Dame had a chance to get in the playoff. And for you to leave your team, and I think that's what left such a bad taste in the mouth of the Irish was we're sitting here the 2 days from now, we're going to find out if we're in the playoff and you're just going to leave. Guys used to leave before bowl games. We have plenty of teams. I mentioned the Gators, plenty of teams that are going to be interim coached, I should say, for their bowl game. So I don't know where it ends. Like if you can walk away from your school when they're about to potentially make a playoff, then you can just leave at any point, any school for any school too. That's the weirdest part for me. But yeah, just a crazy coaching carousel situation this year. And I think it's going to be wild until we see another one like that again. Before we wrap up the show today, guys, I got a little bit of, this just seemed so heavy college football that I really wanted to just get all that out there. A little bit of NFL stuff I want to talk about. I'll talk about the Eagles for a quick second. Minshew Mania is running wild in Philadelphia. Am I serious? Sort of, right? So we played the Jets, and, he looked great. He was able to throw the ball more than Jalen Hurts has done basically all year. I did predict once we traded for Minshew that he would start between 1 and 3 games this year. And I think he's almost guaranteed to start next week because Jalen's still not 100%. And I think if he does anything close to this next week, it's going to be Minshew the rest of the year. And I'm not talking playoff runs necessarily or anything, but I think you need to find out what you have in this guy, because what he was able to do in Jacksonville with very little behind him, and I'm not saying we're stacked with offensive weapons here in Philly right now, but it's probably a little more than he's dealt with in Jacksonville. So if we realize that, no, we can win games and put up points and yards and numbers with Gardner, and we don't have to draft another quarterback, and this isn't even a great draft for that, even though we have the 3 first-round picks in the first round, might be the way to go. And again, I'm not saying this all based off of one game against the Jets. I'm saying this based off of what we've seen from Jalen Hurts this year and what he's somewhat limited in doing, throwing the football. I'm not denying that he's a fantastic athlete, can run the ball, can break ankles like Allen Iverson on a football field, right? But he's limited in passing. And when you're the quarterback, the guy that throws the ball, that's a problem. I don't know, the Jalen Hurts fan base has certainly quieted down. They're not, just anything he does, they're not all for it anymore necessarily. So that's good. I always thought that was a really weird way to take everything. So I'm just interested to see if how Gardner does this week and moving forward, as I'm trying to see here who we have this week. Oh, that's right. We're on a bye this week. That's why I can't find it. So I still think after this week, Gardner would play one more week. I know we basically have the Giants, Washington football team, and the Cowboys left. So we're playing I think we play the Giants again after the bye week, something like that. And we should have easily won that game last time. Obviously, Jalen Hurts threw 4 interceptions, 3 of them in the red zone, something crazy like that, right? So assuming you don't do that again, you beat the Giants, and then there's a real quarterback conversation going in the next year. I'm on Team Minshew, not just because of one good game against the Jets that most people should have, right? I just overall think he's better for this team. He can do more with less. And, point blank, he can throw the football better. He can't run the ball as well, obviously, because Jalen Hurts is, excels at that, but he can throw the ball better. And that's what I want out of my quarterback, simply put. It's not a great way to end the show, guys, but this is news that kind of came out late last night when I was watching Vikings Steelers. What a game that was too, right? Like the Vikings go up 29-0, barely find a way to win the game, but they do. So good for Minnesota. But late last night and into this morning, we learned that the former Denver Broncos receiver Demaryius Thomas has passed away at age 33. Normally talking about two former players losing their life in one episode is not great, but I would be remiss to not bring this up at least for a minute. I've always been a fan of this guy. I think a lot of people here in Florida will remember him for Tim Tebow's playoff win. Obviously, that slant he took like 80 yards against Pittsburgh. Just a great receiver, great person. Peyton Manning and other guys have come out. Tim Tebow have come out and just said, he's been a great teammate, but a much better person on top of all that. Great fantasy player. If you had him, you were never going to be disappointed. Obviously not a Broncos fan, so I don't have a huge connection to him, but he's always been a joy to watch. Absolute shame that, just out of the league. I think he was out for a year or so. Age 33, way too young, man. It's 3 years younger than me. I'm about to be 30 here in a few months. Just way too young, and thoughts and prayers to his family and his teammates and anybody that is affected by this. Rest in peace, Demaryius Thomas. That's going to wrap up today's show. I appreciate you guys watching and listening, however it is you do get Phil Talk Sports into your life. We'll see you next time. I'm sure Nick will be back by then. So enjoy Army Navy this weekend, and I'll see you next time.